It's good to see you. How are you? I hope you're all well and you're having a nice weekend. Happy Father's Day for all of those fathers celebrating this weekend. I thought I'd do a little bit of our folklore book. I know some of you have been quite interested in this, so I thought I'd do some more of that. And I did write on my community post earlier this week. Well, no, not even earlier this week. It was only a few days ago, man. I don't know, time flies, doesn't it? But it just had a few situational things to sort out this week, and all good, nothing wrong. But thank you for your patience and thank you for your kindness. You've been wonderful. But I didn't want you to think I'd forgotten it, okay? Because I don't forget, I think about you a lot. Yeah, so and I was on Shizzy Wiznet's channel the other night, and he was doing the Mayor of Dalton, and I joined him halfway through, and we had a good old laugh, and a giggle, and a cackle, and yeah, I cracked up, and he cracked me up, and then we talked about the YSL trial. So if you've been watching the Young Thug trial, and wanted to know my opinion on it, it's on his channel. Now the link is in my community tab for that video, which will take you straight over to Shizzy's channel, and give him a like and a follow for me if you haven't already. But yeah, my opinion on, as I'm a massive trial watcher, I'm so into the Karen Reid trial at the moment, and also the YSL. I haven't missed a day, so I've been watching that. So yes, if you want to know my opinion on it, I think I might have made it quite clear. In other words, chat, I had a good old rant. So if you want to hear Welsh Lady with Breather Dragon Fire, head on over to my community tab and click on the link in there. Please like and subscribe to this video. If you're new here, subscribe. Please like the video, share it about a bit, and make sure all your notifications are on the front end and the back end. And what I mean by that is by ringing the bell and clicking all, but by going into your channel notifications on your notification settings in YouTube, and making sure they're not muted on that side. So within that, I shall get on to looking at this the next chapter of our Welsh folklore and Welsh fairy tales and folklore. God, can't sleep. Well, I can't sleep. I could tell you that now. Can't sleep, can't speak. There we go. Never mind. Let's have a go now. Make sure you got a nice cup of tea with you now, mind. So this one is called The Curse of Pantannas. Long ago, at the farm of Pantannas in Glamorgan, there lived a churlish old husbandman. He hated the fair folk, who danced on his fields to the light of the moon, and longed to discover some way of ridding his land of them. Not being able to think of any plan, he went to an old witch, and he told her of his wish. She made him a promise to give her one night's milking on his farm, and then advised him thus: wherever you see a fairy ring in your fields, plough it and sow it with corn, she said. When the fairies find the greensward gone, they will never revisit the spot again. The farmer took her advice. He yoked his oxen and drove his iron ploughshare through every circle in which the fairies had danced at night, and sowed it with corn. The nightly sounds of dance and song ceased, and fairy was afterwards seen in the fields of Pantannas. The farmer rejoiced greatly, imagining vain things, until one evening in the spring of the year, when this wheat was green in the fields. The farmer was returning home in the red light of the setting sun when a tiny little man in a red coat came to him, unsheathed a little sword, and directing the point towards him said, "Bear with me now, got to read some Welsh. Diolch daw, vengeance cometh, I my gyrchlaw, fast it approacheth." Oh dear. After saying this, the mannequin disappeared. The farmer tried to laugh, but there was something in the angry, grim look of this little man which made him feel very uncomfortable. Spring, however, turned into summer, and summer into autumn, without anything happening, and the farmer thought that he had been very foolish to fear the threat of the little man in the red coat. In the autumn, when the corn was golden in the fields and ripe with the sickle, the farmer and his family were one night going to bed. Suddenly they heard a mighty noise which shook the house as though it would fall. As they trembled with fear, they heard a loud voice saying, "Daw dail, vengeance cometh." Next morning, no ear or straw was to be seen in the cornfields, only black ashes. The fairies had burnt all the harvest. The farmer was walking through his fields, gazing ruefully at the destruction wrought by the fairies, when he was met by the same little man as before. Pointing his sword threateningly, the elf said, "Need on dechrau, it but beginneth." The farmer's face turned as white as milk, and he began to plead for pardon. He was quite willing, he said, to allow the fields where the fairies had been to dance and sing to grow into greensward again. They could dance in their rings as often as they wished without interference, provided only they would punish him no more. "No," was the stern reply. "The word of the king had gone forth that he will avenge himself on thee, and no power can recall it." The farmer burst into tears and begged so sorrowfully to be forgiven for his fault that the little man at last pitied him and said that he would speak to his lord. "I will come again at the hour of sunset 3 days hence, and bring thee my lord's behest." When the time came on the 3rd day, the sprite was awaiting the farmer at the appointed spot. "The king's word," he said, "cannot be recalled, and vengeance must still come. Still, since thou repentest thee of thy fault and art anxious to atone, the curse shall not fall in thy time, nor in that of thy sons, but will await thy distant posterity." This promise comforted the farmer. The dark green circles of grass grew again. The gay elves danced in them, and sound and music gladdened the fields as of old. The dread voice came at times repeating the threat, "Daw dail, vengeance will come." But the farmer passed away in peaceful old age, and his sons followed him to the churchyard without feeling any effects of the curse pronounced by the king of the fairies. More than 100 years after the first warning had been uttered, Maddo, the heir of Pantannas, was betrothed to Tellery, the daughter of the squire of Penchraig-Daff, and the wedding was to take place in a few weeks. It was Christmas-tide, and they made a feast of Pantannas, to which Tellery and all her king were bidden. The feast sped merrily, and all were seated round the hearth, passing the hours with tale and song. Suddenly, above the noise of the river, which flowed outside the house, they seemed to hear a voice saying, "Dieth amser ymddeol." The time for revenge is come. A silence fell on all the joyous company. They went out and listened if they could hear the voice a second time. But long though they lingered, they could make out no sound except the angry noise of the full river plunging down its rocky bed. They went back into the house. Gradually their fears were chased away, and all was as it was before. Again, above the sounds of mirth and the noise of the waters, as they boiled over the boulders, was heard a clear voice. "Daeth yr amser. The time has come." A dread noise crashed around them, and the house shook to its foundations. As they sat speechless with fear, behold, a shapeless hag appeared at the window. Then one, bolder than the rest, said, "What dost thou, ugly little thing, want here?" "I have nought to do with thee, chatterer," said the hag. "I had come to tell the doom which awaits this house, and that other which hopes to be allied with it. But thou hast insulted me. The veil which conceals it shall not be lifted by me." With that she vanished. No one knew how or whither. When she had gone, the voice proclaimed again, more loudly than ever before, "Daeth amser ymddeol. The time for vengeance has come." Terror and gloom fell upon all. The guests before long parted and went trembling home, and Madoc took his betrothed back to Pengraig doing all that a fond lover could do to dispel her fears, for she had been struck to the heart with nameless dread. The hours of darkness succeeded one wearily after another. No Madoc returned to Pantannas. Morning came, but still no Madoc, and his aged parents, already shaken by the vision of the hag and the strange voices which had interrupted their joyous feast, were almost beside themselves with anxiety. As the day wore on, without any sign of Madoc, they sent messengers in all directions to seek news of him. But all they could discover was that he had turned his footsteps homewards after bidding farewell to his betrothed at Pengraig. All the countryside turned out to find him. With minute care they searched every hill and dale for many miles around, and dragged the depths of every river, but never a trace of him could be found. And many weeks of unavailing search had gone by. The father and mother sought an aged hermit who dwelt in a cave high up the country, and asked him whether their lost son would come back to them. He told the lamenting parents that the judgment threatened in olden times by the fairies had overtaken the hapless youth, and bade them hope no more to see him, whether he were alive or dead. It might perhaps come to pass that after generations had gone by he would reappear, but not in their lifetime. Time rolled on, weeks grew into months, months grew into years, and gradually all came to believe that the hermit had spoken true. All, that is to say, except one. The gentle maiden, Tellery, never ceased to believe that her beloved was alive and would come back again. every morning. When the sun burst open the gates of dawn, she would stand upon the summit of a high rock, looking over the landscape far and near. And even again, she would be seen at the same spot, seeking some sign of her lover's return, until the sun sank behind the battlements of the west. Madoc's father and mother died, and their mortal remains were laid to rest. But Teleri never failed of hope. Year after year she watched until her bright eyes became dim and her chestnut hair was silvered. Worn out with fruitless longing, she died before her time, and they buried her in the graveyard of the old chapel of the Van. One by one, those who had known Madoc died, and his strange disappearance became only a faint tradition. Teleri's undying belief that her lover was still alive was, however, true. This is what had happened to him. As he was returning home from Pencrigdaff, the sounds of the sweetest music he had ever heard in his life came out of a cave in the Raven's Rift, and he stopped to listen. The strains, after a while, seemed to recede further into the cave, and he stepped inside to hear better. The melody retreated further and further, and Madoc, forgetting everything else, followed it further and further into the recesses of the cavern. After he'd been listening for an hour or two, as he thought, the music ceased, and suddenly remembering that after the strange events of the night his parents would be anxious for his return, he retraced his footsteps rapidly to the mouth of the cave. When he issued forth from the hollow, the sun was high in the heavens, and he realized that he had been listening to the music longer than he had first thought. He hastened towards Pantannas, opened the door, and went in. Sitting by the fire was an aged man who asked him, "Who art thou that comest in so boldly?" A sense of bewilderment came over Madoc. He looked round him. The inside of the house seemed different from what he'd been accustomed to. He went to the window and he looked out. There appeared to him to be several curious differences in the aspect of the country also. He became dimly conscious that some great change had passed over his life, and answered faintly, "I am Madoc." "Madoc?" said the aged man. "Madoc? I know thee not. There is no Madoc living in this place, nor have I ever known any man of that name. The only Madoc I have ever heard of was one who, my grandfather said, disappeared suddenly from this place, nobody knew whither, many scores of years ago." Madoc sank on a chair and wept. The old man's heart went out to him in his grief, and he rose to comfort him. He put his hand on his shoulder when, lo, the weeping figure crumbled into thin dust. Well, chat, that was The Curse of Pantannas. It was quite a sad one, don't you think? Oh, I feel a bit, it's a bit creepy in it. No, Teleri, lover, she was gazing out that window. She never gave up on him. She never gave up on her love. She knew he was alive and that he would return, and unfortunately she'd gone before him. But imagine that. It was his grandfather sat in his house. His own grandfather. Or his father's grandfather. I can't remember now. I'll have to read back. But he said he just touched his shoulder and he turned to dust. The Curse of Pantannas. Welsh Fairy Tales and Folklore. I hope if you're reading this at night time, you don't get too scared. I don't think he was too scary anyway. It's mad to think back and think, I wonder. I hope you could down to sleep now and drift off into the land of Nod. If, of course, it's your bedtime. And if it's not, well, I just hope you enjoyed the story and you give me a like at the thumbs up button. That's all, just a thumbs up. You can leave me a comment if you like. You know I'll respond. Keep an eye on the community post. I'll let you know what's going on. See you soon, chat. Ta-da!